All right, here we are. We're in Vicky 3 Academy. I'm going to do one last Komei video. So I was filming it as just like an actual full playthrough, but like I don't think that that's what we need. I think that we just need like a 15 to 20 minute video so that people can just watch that and be done. And the Kick the Tires Komei was kind of like the rough draft, but as I played, the more things that I saw, the more things that changed the way that I evaluated stuff and even the way that I tell the story. So this is sort of like the capstone for Komei right now. And then as things change, I will come back. As the rules change, I will come back. But it sounds like the community has definitely taken it off. So what have we been doing as Komei? So as Komei, what we've been doing is we've been trying to do what has become clear to me is actually called this is the Oshio plot. So Oshio Heiichiro was a dude in real life inside of the Tokugawa Shogunate who tried to overthrow it in 1836, 1837. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to use him to overthrow the Tokugawa Shogunate. There have been some people who have literally done it as a civil war. It's very fast, and if you're good, you can get there with a civil war in 1837 that puts the Buddhist monks in charge of the government, and then from there on out, it just lets you roll. I think it would be as easy on game start probably as just firing the troops everywhere except for the capital and then just fighting, but I think that's gonna require new people to have a little more understanding of how to use conscription and stuff like that than I want to put the burden on them now. And so what we're gonna keep doing is we're gonna do like conspiracy plot stuff. But just be aware that if you want to maximize the speed with which you remove the shogunate, that you probably do want to do a civil war. It's going to be very quick, and if you know how to win it, it's going to be pretty effective. But that's not what we're doing here. We are using a lot of the tools that the game has given us to help build a stronger Japan. So you've got your Tokugawa shogunate. They are isolationist. This is the Sakoku period. Gradually, they've been losing power because they have not done a particularly good job of placating the problems in their society. Their economy is doing really well, but their society is starting to fray. There's Dutch studies are coming in, and the intelligentsia are learning different languages, so that way they can learn stuff from the small number of Dutch here off of Nagasaki. I think that's where they were. And of course, the Ronin are just like exploding in population because the shogunate we're not fighting anybody, and so like you have this entire class of people, this warrior class that has no one to fight and no one's willing to pay them to fight, and so your society is starting to blow apart. And that's what you're trying to do here, is you're trying to overthrow Tokugawa so that way you can bring in Komei. Komei is 5 years old right now, and so the mastermind of the plot is absolutely Oshio. And then Komei is just sort of like the figurehead. But I like that because it means that if you bring Komei back early and you want to get rid of him and move over to a republic or something like that, that you can. That's definitely an option. But the important thing is that you're going to be re-rolling this starting ideology on the shogunate character. And that's simply because it's going to determine how willing the shogunate is to work with Oshio, or the daimyo who are in charge of the government to work with Oshio. In this case, I'm going to recommend re-rolling into pacifist, just because I'm recommending right now that people not go into colonialism, because I've seen way too many times Russia pick this up, and then I'm just stuck with a bunch of colonialism that I invested that I can't profitably use. But if you want to do it and you want to go for a jingoist instead, you 1,000% can. The reason that I recommend pacifist is that I think that national militia is a lot stronger than peasant levies. And so what we could do is we could immediately start working on a professional army instead of the national militia. But I think it's okay to go ahead and just do a little bit of research. So again, here, if you are trying to rush colonialism to deny it to the Russians, then you take colonization. If you're trying to rush national militia so you can do politics, then you do mandatory service. So I'm going to do fast research, fast enact, fast build, fast hire. Just so that way we can like chew through stuff. People can see basic orders of things. If you're going national militia, then you go ahead and you do this. That's going to take you 23 months. Now, while that 23 months is ticking, you're going to be working on something that I'm calling LV1, Landed Voting 1. So I recommend landed voting 1, not because it's a particularly likely outcome. In order to roll on landed voting, you are going to have to immediately reorganize your government into this. But that's okay. That's a perfectly fine immediate first organization to be working with. And it means that the shogunate is going to give you a lot of legitimacy, which means that you're going to be ticking very quickly on things. And then the intelligentsia are going to be giving you the roll percentage from their clout. Now, the roll percentage is pretty low, but because you're going to be rolling so quickly and you're going to be working on your intelligentsia as you play, there is a chance that you are going to get landed voting before you get to national militia. I'm not going to demonstrate that here in game because most people are not going to get there, but I want you to be aware that that might happen. And if that does happen, that's great. But if you do get that, then the second technology that you get, pretty much for everyone, the second technology is going to have to be academia, whether you go colonization or national militia. That doesn't matter. But if you get an early landed voting, you have to take empiricism, because if you don't take empiricism and you have an election in 1840, then it's a disaster. Because if you have that election in 1840 without empiricism, you cannot form the Constitutional Reform Party. But in the event that you do form it, that there's a really neat little bonus that you can get in game from a journal entry. So establish a university. It just requires you to have a university with a building level of 2 or greater, which is something you are going to build in your capital. Once you get the academia online, you're going to want to build at least a level 2 in your capital, and that'll give you access to that journal entry. Build a university. Establish university. Would become invalid. Oh, we'll activate if we've researched dialect. No, there, yeah, we got it. All right. So again, if you get an early landed voting roll that just goes really well for you, you can take this. That just gives you a giant chunk of technology points on empiricism, which lets you rush through to the empiricism tech, if that makes sense. I think it should. Ignore whaling. So you're gonna be working on probably either mandatory service or colonization. Then you're working on academia, and then depending on what happens in regards to your landed voting roll while you're waiting on national militia, if you're doing colonization, by the way, then you're probably taking jingoist, in which case you go into professional army, and that's going to be pretty strong too. I think that generally speaking, especially if you're going into landed voting, that you actually want to go into national militia instead of professional army. Reason being that it's going to make you have a weaker armed force IG in Japan, and because of the Bakufu thing here, you actually kind of want to make your samurai weaker rather than stronger. They are friends with your shogunate characters. You want to remove their power whenever you can. So why are we working on peasant levies? Why do we care about jingoist? Why do we care about pacifist? What the heck? Well, this personal ideology is going to overwrite everything here, which means that if this dude personally is in favor of the national militia, everyone in the shogunate is in favor of the national militia, which means that we can switch from something that gives 25% extra landowner strength to something that gives minus 25 extra landowner strength. And because we have an outrageous amount of legitimacy and a lot of clout that is in favor of that, it's incredibly easy to get either one of these passed whenever the shogunate is in favor of it. So I'm just going to go ahead and say we get national militia, and then you have to make some choices in regards to like the laws that you've done. If you re-rolled onto jingoist and you went for colonialism, then either one of these are going to be incredibly easy to get past with a strong landowner, right? If you have a strong landowner in favor of colonialism, you can kind of count that as a free roll, because it's only going to take 1 or 2 most of the time. Sometimes it takes a little more, but most of the time. So if you pick up your military rule that you're going for, and you do colonization, it doesn't really matter that much, then my recommendation is to go ahead and go into landed voting and just work with it, like help this pass. In order to get good value out of landed voting, though, you do need to keep in mind how it works. And what it's telling you here is make sure that you have clergymen, and make sure you minimize the number of aristocrats that you have. So we'll go ahead and go into landed voting, and then we'll talk about how to minimize the number of aristocrats and maximize the number of clergymen. So first of all, do not go into secular administration on game start. Do not go into free churches. Do not go into secular academia. You want all of those clergy running around if you're going to have landed voting, because they are going to cast votes in every election, and that voting is going to be kind of like the French estate general, in a certain sense, because it's going to be just a couple of classes of people who can vote, and that clergyman class is going to be really helpful for you. You're going to fire a lot of your officers if you go into national militia, for sure. If you go into professional army, hopefully you can prune this back some anyway, because having a ton of officers on hand who might vote with the shogunate is dangerous, and I would not recommend it. But if you want to go with a professional army and then go down to like 50 troops or whatever, that's almost certainly fine. We can remove them from the capital. I think that would be okay. If you're going to national militia though, then just like literally go down to like 20 or something like that, because you just like don't need them if you're a national militia. Your conscription centers are going to be huge as Japan, which is why I recommend going that path. So if you picked up landed voting, then after that, your next most important thing is going to be appointed bureaucrats. So for landed voting, militia stuff, or professional army, or colonization, you actually probably are going to have this as your starting group. And for that matter, you're going to be bolstering this. But the moment that you get those 2 or 3 job laws done, depending on if you want to do colonization or not, 2 to 3, then you're going to switch into appointed bureaucrats. And you want to be saving appointed bureaucrats to come like immediately after distribution of power, landed voting. Reason being that it's going to dramatically change your methods of production on one thing, but it's a really important thing. It's going to dramatically change it here. It's going to let you do professional bureaucrats instead of hereditary bureaucrats, which is going to in turn dramatically decrease the strength of these aristocrats. It's going to push them out to like subsistence farms, and maybe some of them will even stick around and become some bureaucrats for us. So the next thing you want to be working on is going to be appointed bureaucrats. And the way you're going to be getting there is by, is by bolstering Buddhist monks and intelligentsia. And you've been doing that while working with the shogunate. But now you can kick the shogunate out and bring the Buddhist monks in, and you can work with them this way. And then you can probably remove the bolstering from the Buddhist monks, because they will have been doing a lot of draining. The reason that I'm talking about this from the Oshio perspective is 125 popularity, plus the fact that the Buddhist monks use, you can see here, the same pop types: peasants, clergymen, aristocrats, that you're going to be relying on for your shogunate strength. Same here with intelligentsia. They are also attracting aristocrats and clergymen. And so by working with those two to draw strength away from the shogunate, once this flip has occurred and we're working on appointed bureaucrats, then your Buddhist monks will actually be pretty strong. They will have picked up quite a lot of clout along those couple of years of fighting against the shogunate with just a bolster. So now you could then remove the bolster and go over to suppress. And that is going to be really putting the nail in the coffin for the shogunate, because that's going to just keep on forcing aristocrats to run. And the more that they run from the shogunate, the more lopsided your elections in the landed voting space are going to be. It's going to feel incredible. So you're going to get appointed bureaucrats done. And once you've gotten appointed bureaucrats done, then you kind of have like the world is your oyster. My recommendation is start looking ahead. So if you have a strong enough way to move from closed borders to migration controls for the stuff that's going to be happening after the restoration of Komei, then you can start doing that. You can start working on some of those things. You could move from traditionalism into agrarianism, but I think that generally speaking, Japan is going to benefit more not from being in agrarianism, but in interventionism, just because you can build so much. I don't want this to be a 30-minute video. I want it to be like roughly a 20-minute video. So I'm not going to spend all of the rest of the time talking about law work, but I want to make sure that it is clear to you that what the reason that you want to be doing something to remove the power of the landowners as quickly as possible, while also, not neglecting your economic development, is because they're going to rob you of legitimacy that you need in order to get laws passed. That's why stuff like landed voting is useful, because they're going to give political strength to the IGs that you want to be associating with, because they're going to add stuff here beyond wealth, right? Normally at the beginning of the game, when you have a super autocratic government, then all you have is wealth to determine your power. But once you introduce a democratic process, you dilute that power a lot. Construction, very quickly, I want to tell you that yes, the capital gives you a big bonus, but if you're playing Japan, then you should know that your capital, when you restore the emperor, is actually going to move to Kanto. So play around that. You're going to work with Kyushu, Kansai, and Kanto primarily. My recommendation is to not overbuild your construction sectors at first. I think that it's pretty easy to do that. I would just build this up to a 6 and then work on a little bit of wood. And then I would pop over here and do like this is, not ports. I apologize. I would do this as probably a 4. And then I would go ahead and get a little bit more logging camp, and then get the tools here in Kanto. You could do it in the tools in Kanto or in Kansai, but you're going to run out of infrastructure if you try to do everything in Kansai, so just accept that you have to do some stuff in Kanto and prioritize doing that stuff over there. So do the 2 tooling workshops. They're going to start with crude tools, and there's not going to be any demand for it at first, but you can create demand by just going into sawmills, right? So you just create a demand. That means the tooling workshops are going to start hiring. That's going to be awesome. We got election results in. Cool. Yeah, see, these guys got diluted because they didn't get any votes. And so then we've added the tools, so that's going on. And then we can add a little bit of iron. And by adding the iron to Kanto, we can switch the tooling workshops over to pig iron tools. And then we've kind of created like a nice little industrial loop. It's roughly around then that I would start looking around Kansai to maybe add this university. You don't get the university like immediately because you have to, A, you have to have the technology, and B, you do have to have the money. So just working on your little industrial loop for a little bit is very net value for you. Ignore taxation capacity problems right now, because taxation capacity problems are largely fictitious if your population is mostly peasants. Peasants don't make any money. They're alive. They're there. Ignore them. Don't hurt them. Don't do anything with them. Just don't touch them. They're peasants. Leave them alone. And that's why you just don't worry about taxation capacity problems, because you just don't get that much out of trying to send tax collectors out into rural villages with 120 people. They can't pay for they can't even pay for the assessor to go out to the village and come back. It just doesn't make any sense. Don't do it. Budget stuff I want to tell you about really quickly. If you're working on a law and your legitimacy is pretty low, then it's okay to go to low taxes. If you're working on a law and your legitimacy is pretty high, then it's totally fine to go to high taxes. If you're not working on a law, don't be afraid of very high taxes. But I would, generally speaking, try to avoid situations where you're in very low taxes, because if you're in very low taxes, then the chances are really good that your legitimacy is just like absolute garbage, in which case you haven't been using consumption taxes and stuff, right? So we always want to be using a decree in this game. Road maintenance. And we're gonna, if you're good, which I'm not, but if you are, then what you're doing is whenever you're done building in Kansai, you open up the decree and you pick it up, and then you put it down where you're building. You go to Kanto, and then you pick it up, and then you go back to Kansai, and then you pick it up, and you go to Kyushu. And then you only have to have one road maintenance in play ever, pretty much, because you can just get maximum value out of it that way. But you are going to need to do a little bit of taxing. I typically recommend that people do services and sin in this current build, because I think that that's the thing that's going to get you the most money while also hurting your enemies the most, which is kind of like a good thing. At the beginning of the game, you actually have even more authority because you start in an autocracy, which is just 100 more. So you should be able to do like even more consumption taxes, just make sure that there's consumption taxes that are targeted at the upper class. If you're not sure if they're targeted at the upper class or not, then you can open the thing in question, and then you can go down here to pop needs, and then you can scroll over it, and you can see, okay, aristocrats, clergymen, shopkeepers, farmers, bureaucrats, laborers, clerks. Okay, so this is going to be mostly aristocrats and clergymen. Clergymen are people I'm working with, but aristocrats are people I'm working against, and largely speaking, I'm going to want to hurt aristocrats even more than I'm going to want to help clergymen. So yeah, that's a great tax to be working with, right? On that note, it's okay to remove some of the tea from the world, because you can see how like outrageously expensive it is, or outrageously overbuilt it is in your country. Like it's selling for nothing. So you can get rid of some of those if you want to. You don't have to, but once you start having infrastructure problems, then you absolutely want to, because infrastructure problems are really bad for the growth of your economy. Buildings, do not neglect your methods of production. Once you get tools up and going, then you want to go ahead and start incorporating tools into your methods of production out here. Don't be afraid to go into fishing trawlers either. But once you're done with like just that basic little industrial loop, the reason that I recommend going to Kyushu is so that way you can work on gas streetlights and market stalls. Or market squares. You can start with market squares on at least Kansai, and so don't be shy about that one. But the gas streetlights, you probably want to wait until after you've gotten your little your little industrial loop going, because you need some tools. Otherwise, you can't even really do coal mines. So you do need to get Kanto up and running first. Whether you want to move to coal on 2 tooling workshops or on 5 is kind of up to you. I'm not even really sure which is definitely the right direction, but you don't need thousands of tooling workshops. As long as they're on iron, you can usually get away with somewhere between 2 and 5 before you start working on your coal. I think because you can, God damn it, Walker, because you can do 5 and then be running saws on a bunch of your logging camp, I think generally it's worth it to just build up to 5 and then move. So we could do 5 coal mines here, and if we do 5 coal mines here, then that's going to get us enough coal to run this little coal production method in at least Kansai. A lot of these things you're going to have to develop gradually. Oh wow, this is 22 minutes already. All right, basic plan in terms of the development of your society tech. I think largely this is going to be one where you are going to have to rush for railways. Railways are critical for you as Japan because your infrastructure is going to get maxed out so fast, because you just have such a gigantic economy. So don't neglect going for railways. As mentioned, you probably have to get empiricism pretty quickly, so that way you can actually get good use out of the Constitutional Reform Party in the event that you pass landed voting. If you use this guide at all, and you think that there's still some stuff that needs to be covered, then go ahead and answer down below. But this is going to be mostly a guide targeted for removing the shogunate. And then as people, get better and better at removing the shogunate, it'll become clear why that's good for you, simply because it's going to give you the legitimacy necessary to do like a lot of law work. And as Japan, your laws are all bad. So good luck doing a Komei run of your own. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm Walker. This is We Play Games, and I think I'm gonna put a pin in Komei there. All right, take care, everybody.